Well, hello everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. We are all technology teachers and learners, advancing our practice through collaboration and inquiry. Today's webinar is generously sponsored by Aztec Software, and we have Adrian Fainer, Vice President of Client Relations and Communications, who's going to share a few words with us.
Good afternoon and Happy New Year. Thank you so much, James. I really appreciate this opportunity. We're excited about the new possibilities this new year will present and the opportunity to continue to support COABE through resources like this webinar focusing on technology and collaboration. I'm excited to learn about the best practices our presenters will share today. Because we believe in the potential of people and are focused on building pathways to opportunity, we have built Aztec with a comprehensive set of tools to tap into your learners' potential. Our constant engagement with you and your colleagues across the country have allowed us to keep learning and building the largest and most comprehensive portfolio of education and workforce development resources in the market. To that end, I'm sure most of you already know of Aztec Software's 40-year presence providing technology-based solutions. Adding to our family of companies, we have also provided life skills educations with both computer and print resources, as well as adding Paxson Publishing with its extensive print-based library of resources. Regardless of your learners' needs, we have solutions to support them. Today, our portfolio of learning provides the most extensive solutions from ABE, basic skills remediation, to high school equivalency prep, to post-secondary and workforce employability skills. With our vast experience of technology and the adult learners' needs, we can assist your learners with their evolving goals. Not only do we support you with these amazing and dynamic products, but we have teams of people to support the objectives of your organization. If you'd like to learn more about what we can offer you, please feel free to reach out to us. I think that the slides are not presented, but at crs@aztecsoftware.com, and the information's in the top right corner. Thank you again, and I appreciate this opportunity. Thanks, James.
Thank you so much, Adrian, and thank you, Aztec Software, for your sponsorship. Without friends and partners like you, we couldn't offer these webinars to our members, so we are very grateful for your partnership. Okay, our presenters today are Jillian Gierke from the Philadelphia Adult Literacy Alliance and Charlie Heel from HIAS Pennsylvania. Please welcome Jillian and Charlie by saying hello in the chat box. You can also submit questions in the Q&A box. And with that, I will turn it over to Jillian and Charlie. Thank you.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Jillian, and I am one of our presenters today. I'm going to share my screen with you just a moment. All right. And I'd like to thank COABE for having us today. Charlie and I are always excited to share everything that we learned from this project. Like we said, our topic today is that we're all technology teachers and learners and advancing our practice through collaboration and inquiry. Jennifer Coburn is not joining us today. She's not able to, but she is the one that actually started this project. She's a doctoral candidate at the University of Pennsylvania Graduate School of Education. So our goals for today, like we said, we're going to share this professional development initiative that use collaboration and inquiry to support the adoption of digital tools within our adult education settings. You'll hear about our experiences in this research project. Oops, I'm sorry. You'll hear about our experiences in the initiative and gain some specific ideas for using Google Classroom text messaging, and then of course we want to connect and share as a community. I think this is appropriate. To begin with, we just want to make sure that we all have the same understanding that technology is like the ocean. It's this vast, vast space that, sometimes we're surfing like a pro. The internet's working, our computers are working well with us, applications are up and running. And then other times we get caught in the wave. The internet stops working, something's buggy, it's just not going well. And so that is something that we all experience. It is not true that there's someone that's just always riding the wave and never gets caught up with any problems when it comes to implementing technology. And so we're wondering if you can tell us what is one success that you've had, or not a success, but what is your biggest challenge using technology right now? If you can use your chat boxes to share with us, what is one challenge or one word that describes your biggest challenge using technology right now? Let's see. I'm sorry. I think one of my challenges right now is that I'm not able to get my chat visible.
Well, I can help with that for a little bit, Jillian, if you want.
Charlie.
They're coming in fast and furious.
Yes.
Let's see, we have consistency, Google Classroom, equitable access to devices and Wi-Fi, student access to classroom, lack of engagement, engaging students, accessibility, unstable internet connectivity for learners, engagement, access, connectivity. I think we're seeing a pattern here. Engagement, access, and connectivity.
Right.
Age, transportation, engagement, access to laptops and Chromebooks, reading comprehension and digital texts, getting IT to hook up my computer in the classroom. Again, I think access, bad connections, internet issues, black screen, access, making sure the internet is working at school, connections, learning curve, impersonal, I suppose, yeah, the sense of online learning being more impersonal, reaching students, students with different levels of digital literacy, bandwidth, lack of access to the internet, conversations in ELL classes, students, connectivity issues, reliability of the internet in rural Wisconsin, getting to work seamlessly when it needs to be working. Yep.
Yes.
Access or the lack thereof, access and engagement, time, sound, access and engagement, unstable connectivity with students, too many options and not enough expertise. Often my students are not able to join the Zoom meetings. Access limitations, getting more tablets into class, learning curve, not being able to share Google Documents in the breakout room, connectivity, limited Wi-Fi and computer access. So yeah, again, I think access and connectivity seem to be very big concerns and challenges. Yeah, different skill sets, Zoom fatigue, getting instructors to be comfortable with it and keeping students engaged. There's a lot. I mean, we've got
absolutely. And
I
think that,
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, Charlie.
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. And I think that we can all agree that we've had at least one experience in all of these areas. If maybe we're experiencing one of these every day, but technology is not perfect. It's really our ability to work with what is available and to make the best of the situation. And so to switch gears a little bit, I'd like to know, what is one success that you've had using technology with your learners? Because we know there are always problems, but instead, can we focus on what successes we have had? And Charlie, can I have your help again? Because I'm not able to get my chat screen up.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you.
Let me say successes. Creativity, gained learners because travel is not required. Yeah, that's a huge success. Getting feedback, using chat, adding online registration for adult education enrollment, maintained community. That's wonderful. Teaching digital literacy, increased PD for staff, varied material, creating assignments on different platforms, Zoom meetings, less distractions, students are on time, yeah. Neighborhood mapping and lab setting, overcoming barriers to participation like childcare and transportation. Yep, absolutely. Resources on Zoom are great. Yeah, there's so much you can do with this platform. Able to connect and achieve our goal, which is to get it done. Being able to provide automated grading and immediate feedback. Distance is not an issue. Digital learning overcomes roadblocks of transportation, childcare. Yeah, so overcoming these barriers that can sometimes be there with in-person classes are removed. Yeah.
Very good.
Engagement and honesty, better attendance, immediate feedback. Again, we have a deluge of really great feedback here and input.
And you know, I think it's really important to remember these successes because the problems that can come with using technology are many, and we can get lost in well, getting caught in the wave. And it's important to pause and remember the success that you are having as you move through this and challenge yourself with learning new technology and teaching your students how to use these tools so that they can continue learning and meeting their goals despite a pandemic. So thank you for sharing, everyone. Before we tell you about our own research, I'd like to give you a little bit of background on the project itself. And this is the PHL Adult Education and Technology Initiative. PHL is Philadelphia. And this is the project that was created by our colleague, Jennifer Coburn, as an approach to inquiry-based collaborative professional development. Her intention was to spark curiosity and to generate innovative ways of using digital tools in adult education. But I think one of the outcomes for us as participants was really this opportunity to network and collaborate with other adult ed folks that we probably wouldn't collaborate with under normal circumstances. And this is what Jen refers to as communities of practice. We worked in groups of 3 to 4 people developing research questions based on a problem and in regard to a digital tool as a possible solution. We met about once a month to problem solve and share ideas. And she asked us to document and reflect on what we learned, which became the basis for a toolkit, which we will share with you at the end of this presentation. And so I'm going to hand this back over to Charlie, and he's going to tell you about his experience and his own research project. So Charlie, I'm going to stop sharing and
I will start sharing. Excellent, thank you. All right, so I wanted to start by giving a bigger picture idea of what this project was. We were divided into 4 teams. Each team had 3 or 4 participants, and we all had different areas that we were going to explore in our project. So team 1 was integrating technology into the classroom. Team 2 was engaging learners with content outside of the classroom. Team 3 was learner retention. and team 4 was integrating course content with technology. So my group was team 2, and I had two colleagues that I was working with from Turning the Tide, which is a community and technology center in Philadelphia, and also from Community Learning Center, which is an adult literacy nonprofit organization in West Philadelphia. They used Khan Academy for the majority of it, although Jamae from Turning the Tide also used CellEd in the first sprint of the project. I stuck with Google Voice and Remind for my 2 sprints and experimented with how to utilize those. The questions that we specifically came up with to answer were, how does technology-based homework motivate students, motivate learners to engage with content outside the classroom? And the second question was, what are the ways in which technology-based individual learning sustains momentum outside the classroom? So yeah, my basic idea was to send text message homework to my students using either Google Voice or Remind. And the idea was that they would, after class, if we were talking about clothing, I would send them a text saying, what are you wearing? And they would write back, I am wearing a shirt and pants and shoes. Then I would keep all that data on a spreadsheet in terms of who responded. And so the real goal was to engage students. So recording who responded. And then a second step was who responded actually answering the question. And then if I really wanted to get into it, it would be who responded answering the question in a full grammatically correct sentence. Engagement was pretty low at the beginning. So we brainstormed ways of encouraging participation. And one idea that a colleague of mine suggested was using a progress chart. So it was a big poster and it had all the students' names on it. And we did like a little star system, and I would review the homework in class, and then I would put little stars on the board for any student who had responded, 2 stars if they responded and answered the question. And at the end, we gave a little prize to the student who did the most homework and had the most stars on this progress chart. And then at the end, we spoke to the students a little bit about it and got their feedback on, was it helpful? What would we do to make it more successful in the future? What were some of the challenges that they found as they were doing these homework assignments via text message? So just going to show you a couple of examples. This is one that I sent out early, and you can see the question is, what did you do this weekend? Please tell me 3 things. And these students who responded tended to have higher rates of engagement anyway, but you can see they answered the questions completely. So they all would have gotten 2 stars. Pretty exciting. And then in Remind, it was the same thing. Remind, I should explain the difference between Remind and Google Voice is that Remind is really made for the teacher of a class, and they send out, you compose one text message through the Remind app, and it gets sent out as a text message to the students. And so they find it on their phone, and then they reply to the text message. But it looks like it's one-on-one communication. With Google Voice, you have your group of students and you text them, and it becomes like a big group chat conversation thread, which can have some unexpectedly hilarious results. But here you can see it was the same student replying in all instances, whereas with Google Voice, it was different students. I wanted to point out in particular one particular student who I thought was a very interesting case study. He was an older gentleman from Eritrea. We will call him Dawit. And his English proficiency when he started with us was pre-literate. And his digital literacy was beginner level, true beginner, in that text messages were something brand new to him. He had never, because he was pre-literate, he had never needed to send a text message before. And so when I started doing this assignment, I thought, hey, I'll send you a message and you guys just read the message and reply to me. And through him, I learned some very valuable lessons that it's not so straightforward as that. That in fact, that two-step process of I send you a message and you send me a message is actually like a 20-step process, because I send you a message and then you have to find the correct app on your phone, and then you have to push that app, and then it comes up and you have all of these text messages from different numbers, and you have to find which one is mine, then click on it, then you have to read and understand it, and then you have to push the little space bar so you can start typing a reply, and then you have to push the send button at the end of it. So it's actually this multi-layered process that I had summarized into one step, and through him I really learned a lot about this, how you have to break digital technology into little steps if you want people to be able to follow you. So starting pre-literate, unable to read or write in English, we had him, he was very resistant at the beginning, but he did start to reply, and I'm going to show you some of his responses, which were a huge step. Just the fact that he was able to complete all of those little mini steps in terms of sending me a text message was a huge success. And then the messages themselves, I think, are a real indicator of how much progress he made. They may look like they are not, they may not look like they're saying much, but in fact they are, and I'll read them to you. It's the first one at the beginning is, "Hi, good morning, teacher." And I wrote back, "Good morning, David. I hope you are having a great day." And he wrote, "Hi, teacher Charlie. How are you? Today I am good." And then his last message on the screen is, "Hey, Charlie, tomorrow, no class. Yes, I understand. Okay, good night." So the fact that he was engaging with me at all on via text message was just a huge leap forward for him, and I was very proud to see him take this challenge on. And it's all through this project that we did. I probably wouldn't have done it before. So to give you some more generalized findings of what I learned through it, and what my colleagues learned, first is that digital literacy and competency using the smartphone vary greatly among learners. This came up in the chat that everybody's at a different place. So I had some students who were already pretty comfortable using technology. They were literate in their first language, they were literate in English. And I had other students who had never used a cell phone before, had never sent a text message before, and were not literate in English, or sometimes in their first language. There's definitely a connection between literacy and digital literacy. And I have found that students who are have stronger literacy skills are also usually more comfortable using new technology. I just talked at length about the importance of scaffolding the technology, breaking it down into little bite-sized pieces so that people can follow along with you. Formatting can be a barrier. So I found that with using two different platforms, using Remind and Google Voice, actually was confusing for some students. The formatting of the Remind text was a little bit different. It would put my name at the beginning, and it was just like, it was my first initial and my last name. So students had no idea what this meant, and there was a lot of extra text, a lot of extra characters, and I think there might have been a timestamp, or click here to reply, sort of things, and so that was a bit of a barrier. And I had experimented with sending different questions on the different platforms and sending the same questions on the different platforms, but I should have just stuck with one platform and just committed to that. But it was, we were experimenting. And then the last thing is that context really matters. Trying to get people to use a new form of technology, I think it's important to help them realize how this can be helpful in their daily lives, and to give them material, if you're trying to help them with it, give them reasons to start using it. So putting it in the context of reviewing what we'd learned in class was one example of how that can help. And then a little thing called COVID-19 happened, and things changed slightly. So suddenly everybody had to become experts at using computers overnight and you know, communicating digitally by text message and other things. So through that, our use of technology has really evolved in the last 7 or 8 months. I'm sure that's the case for pretty much everyone here. And what we found works best for us are actually WhatsApp and Zoom. So I don't use Remind or Google Voice anymore. I find that most students are now, they already have WhatsApp on their phone, and they already know how to use it. It has this wonderful feature where you can record your voice, so you don't have to worry about typing, which is an amazing asset for people who are still coming, you know, emerging with their literacy skills. And then of course Zoom is the standard. So we try to get everybody onto Zoom to attend classes. So Zoom is really what we use for in-class instruction, and WhatsApp is what we use to engage students outside of the classroom. And that can be anything from giving them homework, sending them their slides, their classroom slides, or more administrative things, making announcements to the whole class. And so we have a WhatsApp group for our classes, and then we have direct communication with the students individually. And that's how this whole project has evolved. And I'm going to turn it back to Jillian.
All right, great.
me
Actually,
stop sharing.
Charlie, a couple of questions that came up in the chat.
Sure.
Was this an online class or distance learning, or?
That's a great question. Sorry I didn't explain that earlier. So we actually did this prior to COVID-19, and the class was held in person. So that's how that leaderboard, I had an actual physical leaderboard. If I were doing it now, I would just have it on a Google slide.
And several people would like to know, what were the prizes?
I wish I could remember. I think we gave them gift certificates or you know, gift cards. Yeah, little gift cards.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the student that you shared for your case study, was he able to read in his own language?
Yes, he did have some literacy in his first language. But I don't know. I don't know to what extent. But he seemed to be comfortable with the characters in his first language. Yeah.
And was your work done with ESL students only?
Yes. My where I work, we're a resettlement agency for newly arrived refugees, and so my work is exclusively in ESL. Yeah.
And did all of your students have smartphones? And did any of them already use apps such as WhatsApp to communicate with families and friends?
Yes, they all had smartphones. I think we give smartphones to our clients when they arrive. So some of them may have never used one before. Others may have used them prior to resettling in the United States. But as for their comfort level using it, it varied greatly. And even the Eritrean student who I highlighted, he did come up to me at one point with a YouTube video that he had found. So he could use YouTube, but text messaging was a different matter altogether.
Great. So there are some really great questions that are coming up in the chat box right now. Just for time purposes, we're going to ask you, if you can, please submit those questions in the Q&A box, because just in case we run out of time, we can still get a transcript of those questions, and we can submit answers to you after the webinar ends if need be. But we will return to Q&A towards the end of the presentation. So we will absolutely be able to get to all of these questions, and want to make sure that everything is clear. So thank you, Charlie.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share again. Okay. Great. Okay. All right, so before I jump into my research, I'll provide some context on where I teach and who my learners are. I work with a nonprofit in Philadelphia called the Garces Foundation. And one of the programs that I'm in charge of is an adult ESL program called English for the Restaurant and Everyday Living. We provide classes year round, typically enroll about 100 learners each quarter. All of our learners are adult immigrants. And as you can probably tell from the title of the program, the majority of our learners are employed in the restaurant industry. And so the biggest problem that I face in our program is learner retention. Like I said at the beginning of each quarter, I have roughly 100 students enrolled, which sounds great. But at the end of the quarter, there are usually 50 to 60 students that regularly attend. And students will tell me that usually the most common reason reported is that learners have a changing work schedule, or work is they're taking on more work, but it's almost always for reasons due to work. And so I started to think about how I could solve this problem. My learners need more flexibility, but not at the expense of the structure that in-person classes provided them twice a week. So I thought that a great compromise might be hybrid classes. Why? Because instead of attending in-person classes at a set time twice a week, students had opportunity to attend only once in person and then study at their convenience with online assignments. And so then I started to think about how I would organize this online learning component of the hybrid course, and Google Classroom came to mind. And so my research question became, is Google Classroom an effective digital tool for a hybrid ESL class? This is a straightforward question, but as educators, we know that successful retention doesn't happen in a vacuum with the use of just one tool. And so from my experience, the concept of successful retention has several implications, and one of them is engagement. And so as you'll see, my research project was also kind of a hybrid focus as well, retention and engagement. I learned a lot of lessons from my data collection. I collected data in two ways. I analyzed assignment completion rates as a quantitative measurement of engagement. And then I conducted interviews to get a sense of what motivated and even discouraged learners in using this tool. And so there are four significant takeaways. The first one is learners felt more motivated to participate in classroom discussion if other students regularly responded to their post. This might seem obvious, but I think that there's a lot of value in remembering that this is what happens in our physical classroom spaces. Learners respond to each other's ideas. So when we move online, I think sometimes there's a tendency to create these assignments with silo-like effects. And we have to remember that what motivates our learners is really that interaction that they get from each other. The second big takeaway was that learners were more likely to complete assignments with multiple choice questions as opposed to open-ended questions. And I think that one's fairly simple. You have to keep your assignments simple, keep it approachable, and you'll have more success that way. The third one is that less than half of learners regularly completed their assignments. And regular, I defined as submitting all but maybe 3 assignments. And the fourth one, this is one that was really important to me. If a learner could not attend in person one week, he or she also did not participate online. And this this really stood out to me because it made me realize that I needed to help my students understand how to make the most of Classroom and to see it as a tool for remaining engaged in coursework, especially when you have to be absent from the physical space. And similar to Charlie, enter COVID-19. It's sort of a paint splatter kind of experience. I all of a sudden found myself in needing to develop and implement a plan for online classes in 2 weeks if I wanted to stay on schedule. So this meant that I needed to choose a course format, select the platform, create instructional materials, and then prepare our students and teachers for their first day of class. This sounds really familiar. It sounds just like my research project. But despite that, I still felt very overwhelmed in that moment. There were a lot of uncertainties, very little information on how to do this remotely, and during a pandemic as well. So I did find comfort, though, in returning to those 4 lessons. And those were kind of like the certainties in a moment of so much uncertainty. And that information that I had gathered myself, I was able to use to inform the design of what would be our brand new online ESL classes. So I knew that our approach had to be straightforward. It had to be as simple as a multiple choice quiz if we expected our learners to participate. Our learners needed an interactive solution with immediate gratification and communicating with classmates and teachers. And I especially knew that we needed a solution that felt familiar, which translating what learners were already accustomed to with in-person classes to the online experience. So, given all the experience I had with Google Classroom as the digital tool for my hybrid class and my research project, it seemed like the obvious choice, a perfect conclusion to my research project, except that it really wasn't the right choice, at least not yet. I started realizing this when I started to consider the extent of what needed to be accomplished and in those 2 weeks. And also keeping in mind that that would have to be done remotely. And so the first thing is that I would need to support learners with downloading the application. The second one, creating a Google account. That can be very tricky. Most of my learners don't have Gmail, email addresses, Google accounts. And I needed to think about the time and the resources it would take in order to support each student with doing that. We would also need to help students log in, and that implies remembering passwords, storing that information safely, creating safe passwords. And that's not even joining the class yet. There needs to be a code. Students need to join the class, and then at that point, you could start to show students how to navigate Classroom. Realistically, I knew this would not work. This was too much at once. And I was really afraid that I would lose too many of my learners in this process. And so this, similar to Charlie, this is my solution. I call it Solution 1.0. And as of April 5th, this is what I've been doing. And we've been successfully operating with this solution. We're using WhatsApp. It's familiar, it's straightforward, it's interactive. My students already know how to use it because we were using it informally to just group students and teachers together. And we're using Zoom because of it was really the most straightforward option. You don't have to create an account. You just had to have students download the application, and then you send them the URL. They click on it. It opens up in the application. Simple enough. I am still using Google Classroom, though, for my teachers. We're networked on there for accessing curriculum. Teachers can contribute their own materials if there's something that they made that they want other teachers to have access to. And There's also forum-like discussions where you can post a question, ask for advice, and communicate with other teachers in that way. With that being said, though, I think that there's a lot of value in thinking about how can I help my students with accessing Google Classroom in the future. And if the overarching goal is to encourage a culture of learning that's open to change and exploration, then there is still a lot of value in exploring a learning management system like Google Classroom. I think it's important for learners to develop the skills to learn online, because my hope is that they won't always be students in my school, that they will move on to community college, where there'll be a different learning management system that they'll need to learn. And so I want my students to become flexible, open, adaptable, and familiar with what learning management systems look like. And so Classroom can be an effective tool in preparing our learners for what I was just talking about. And my students, they love to remind me, poco a poco, or in Spanish, little by little, is really key when it comes to technology. And I'm keeping my research takeaways in mind, and I'm starting to plant the seeds and to design straightforward lessons using these familiar tools. So I'm sending forms, Google Forms, as part of a warm up in class, as a check-in, as homework, doing quizzes that way, sending links to Google Docs to get students familiar with writing together on a shared document. We're using WhatsApp to practice discussion with nested replies, which introduces the idea of forum discussion norms. I have workshops planned for later this winter to show students how to create Google accounts and how to use email. And you can use Google Meet as an alternative to Zoom or any other video conferencing application, really, to show them that it doesn't have to be Zoom. There are other applications where you click on the link and it opens into a video conference. And so once these seeds have been planted, learners might feel ready to move into a more structured course format like Google Classroom. But to be honest, right now, I am still planting. And so I am sticking with my solution 1.0, which is using WhatsApp and Zoom, and slowly introducing some of these concepts and skills as we move along. And so at this point, I'd like to open it up back to discussion. And
there are a couple questions for you here, Jillian.
Great.
Which I figured I would ask you. First one, I'll ask you a couple, and then we can look at them all together. But if the learner could not attend your class in person, can you explain more about why they didn't participate online?
That's a good question. I don't know why they chose not to. I think that, in all honesty, it varied by learner, but I think in some cases it was just a bad week, or because that particular student didn't come to class in person. It could be due to the fact that they didn't do the reading. And this was I don't think I mentioned this, but this was an advanced class. It was a book club. And so it would be difficult to participate online if you haven't done the reading. But what I was really hoping for my students to understand is that you can, if you don't attend in person, you can do the other things on your own time. You can, manage your schedule so that you can fit in some time to do some of the reading and contribute to some of the assignments. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing kind of endeavor.
And How many students did you have in each class? And did you teach all the classes, or do you have any assistants?
So I have about 13 classes usually, with anywhere from 6 to 17 students enrolled. I have 2 teachers for each class, and everyone is a volunteer teacher. And so uh, I've been very fortunate to have a lot of volunteers that have been dedicated for years. They've been volunteering, um, some for 5 years, some for 2. But we have some very committed volunteer teachers that co-teach these classes together.
And how do you assess progress with your solution 1.0?
It's a great question. One of the metrics that we used previously was the CASAS exam, which is, the national standard for ESL assessment. But we're not able to administer those any longer, and so we're relying completely on uh, our learning objectives. So a standard-based assessment where our teachers uh, are the ones providing that feedback in terms of, this student is proficient in this and this. So more of a standard based approach to assessment at this point.
We have a lot of questions coming in. I don't know how you want to proceed. Should we tag team these, or I'll keep reading them out. You
Sure.
can answer them all.
That's
That work?
well, but
All right.
feel free to jump in. Sure.
I'm kidding. All right. Here's another question for you explicitly. Did you contextualize the teaching and learning to their work-related interests and needs?
Yes, our curriculum is contextualized, but I want to be clear, though, that not all of our students are employed in the restaurant industry. We do have students that do other things or are not working, and so it just depends in terms of, the group of students you have together in one class in terms of the appropriate context.
Yeah. Great. Okay. Let me see here. Just checking. Couple questions about CASAS. Are you using B+ instead of CASAS?
I'm not familiar with B+.
No, me either. There is a question. Are you not allowed to do CASAS testing now because of COVID? I wish. But no, CASAS is still required when it's required. Yeah, I don't know, Jillian, if you have anything to add to that, but from my experience, they gave a lot of leeway to agencies and educators as to how to administer the tests, but they still had to be administered according to the CASAS requirements.
Right. We just don't have the capacity to do computerized testing or really to administer tests in person safely to the entire student population. It's logistically, it's just not feasible right now, and so we're focusing our time and efforts more on providing good quality instruction, focusing on curriculum, and using the objectives, which are, they're transparent. Students know what those objectives are at the start of a quarter. They know what they're working towards, and those really have to be the focus at this point.
Jillian, would you encourage your students to attend even if the reading hadn't been done?
Absolutely. I think that there's still a lot of value in being part of that discussion, and you can certainly learn a lot about what happened in the reading, and when you eventually go back to do it, you'll have some insight into what happened that could make it more accessible. So I certainly hope I didn't discourage anyone from attending if they didn't do the
Mhm.
reading.
There seem to be a few questions about attendance. I don't know if you have any general ideas about attendance and encouraging students to come, and what your policies are regarding attendance.
So that is that's a good question. When we were doing classes in person, it was, you could not miss more than 6 classes a quarter, which is very generous. Uh, and at this point with online classes, it just depends on how often the class meets. But with, um, if a student misses 2 weeks of class without any contact, uh, unfortunately, they will lose their spot in the class, and uh, that is just for the sake of uh, keeping the class moving and keeping everyone in communication, really.
Yeah, great. And some questions regarding the materials that we use for online teaching. Do we use textbooks? What other materials would we use for our online classes? I suppose that ties in as well with Google Classroom and WhatsApp as well. There were a couple questions about maybe using WhatsApp to provide materials to students.
Well, Charlie, what do you use WhatsApp as the way to share materials with your students?
Well, a lot of what I do is provided in class, but yes, when I do have to share materials with students, sometimes I'll have activities, and I will send them each. If it's one thing for everybody to work on, you can send it to the group. Sometimes I do activities where each person is assigned a specific piece of information, and I will individually send them their bits on WhatsApp. You can attach files and pictures very easily in WhatsApp. So yeah, I find that very helpful.
Absolutely. One of the questions that I saw asked earlier that I thought was interesting was, why are we choosing to use WhatsApp instead of email? And one of our colleagues actually pointed out to us that WhatsApp is a lot like email. And it just so happens that our students are more familiar, more comfortable with using WhatsApp. And so that's really the answer to that question. We're using it because they're most comfortable with it. There's less resistance to it. And I think our hope is that eventually, we're trying to create this culture that's open to learning and flexible. And so we hope that we'll be able to move into email because that is an important skill to have. And it is the professional mode of communication rather than using WhatsApp. But you have to be honest about what is most accessible at this moment in time to your learners.
Absolutely.
Okay. So just looking at time, it looks like we might need to hand this back over, but I would like to say thank you for being part of our adult education community and for being part of this webinar today, sharing your ideas, and for doing so much with so little, especially right now. We are hoping that you'll want to stay connected with us. We have our emails up here on the screen, and we will send you, hopefully after the webinar today, we'll send out an email with the recording, as well as the PHL Adult Education and Technology Resource Toolkit that all of us as educators and participants in this project helped put together. And we hope that you'll reach out with any questions that you have.
Jillian and Charlie, I'd like to thank you for a great presentation. That was really engaging, really informative. I could tell just being in the background with all the comments and questions, it was really a great topic and a great presentation. So thank you very much. I just launched a poll. So if everybody who's still on could take a minute to fill that out real quick, we would really appreciate it. And I think Adrienne from Aztec Software is still on. So I'd like to give her another minute or two if she wants to say some closing remarks. Adrienne?
Thank you, James. I appreciate it. Wonderful information. Such great best practices. And I think the dialogue in the technology chat was exciting. One of the offerings we'd love to provide for you all, I heard lots of conversations about CASAS. We have our own locator quiz that you don't need Aztec to, you don't have to purchase Aztec to have access to it. There are many quizzes. While some folks may be challenged with some of the technologies, we have that available. So please feel free to reach out to us at crs@aztecsoftware.com. And I wanted to leave you with that free resource. Thank you again, and I hope you all have a wonderful new year. Thank you, James.
Thank you, Adrienne, so much. And thank you, Aztec Software, again, for your support of this webinar and sponsorship of this webinar. It really means a lot. I want to thank everybody who participated today. I hope everybody has a great day and a great rest of the week. Thank you, everybody.